everyone to this, one of the final sessions on how can the left win. We have three speakers, Lindsey, James Schneider and Andrew Murray. They're each going to speak for about 10 minutes. And then we're going to open it up to the floor for questions. My name's Faizi Ismail, I'm a member of Counterfire. And we'll start off with James Schneider. James is the national organizer for Momentum. James.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much.
Can people find their seats quickly so we can get the meeting started?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So my dangerous time, the thing that I think that is dangerous is we might learn the wrong lessons from why the left did win last summer and why Jeremy Corbyn won. I think we need to, I'm going to start by being a little bit downbeat and then hopefully build up a little bit, and then Lindsey and Andrew will be even more ecstatic and upbeat. But we need to, I think we do need to recognise from what a low base of organising and capacity that we were at, and we're a bit better now, but not so much. After 30, 40 years of incredible assaults on, mainly on the trade union movement, but on all other types of democratic civil society organising, we are at a very low base. The left is coming from an incredibly low base, even though we've got this most remarkable thing of having Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell leading the Labour Party, which is incredible, and what an opportunity for the left. But it didn't come about because the left was really strong and knew exactly what it was doing and was really powerful, and it forced its way into the agenda. It sort of happened by accident. It sort of happened more to us than by us, and I think the things that allowed us to win, that caused the victory, those are the elements we need to look to for how we are going to continue the process, to continue to reinvigorate our movement and our movements, and how we can build a mass movement, build an actually credible alternative, win power in a way that we can actually do something that will actually be transformative. Because we shouldn't be under any illusions. If the let's just play pass the parcel and wait till the music stops and hopefully the Tories will destroy themselves so much and we'll win by default, we won't win at all. We might be in government, but we won't be in power unless we've built the types of organisation, the types of popular power that will be able to force through a left agenda. We've already seen the difficulties that Jeremy Corbyn has just within the Labour Party. Imagine Jeremy Corbyn's difficulties within the state. They're going to be what we have now, but amplified enormously. So we need to get very real about the challenges and about the difficulties. So I think that there are three different elements of the campaign last summer that worked unbelievably well, that worked much better than could have been expected, and they were kind of the three things that were the most open and the least planned and the least sort of traditionally organised. Those three things are the events on the platform Grassroots for Corbyn, the second thing was the social media, and the third thing was the volunteer network, which ended up with the 17,000 activists. I'm sure many people here around the country doing phone banking, having stalls, all of those sorts of things. And the thing that those three things share in common is that they used this is a slightly wanky term, but they used a networked capacity. The left, as we currently have it, we've got a lot of great people, lots of great people in this room, but they're not enough of us. They're not enough of us in the currently organised left that don't have the capacity to yet on our own to do things. Kind of like Clive was saying, answering the question about media strategy at the end. It's very, very difficult at the beginning. It was very difficult at the beginning of Jeremy's leadership, just to get enough people together who will have the capacity to take it on. So those three things I said use this broader capacity. So the Grassroots for Corbyn events platform, that was basically a response saying, wow, there are all these different movements, all these different organisations that really like Jeremy Corbyn. They really want to help him, but there's a worry about having to politically police everything, making sure that everything's okay, and if somebody says something that's a bit off, it doesn't fall back on Jeremy. So you've got this open platform where anybody can hold events for Corbyn, which means that the capacity to run events and to build events gets much larger, which is part of the reason why there were so many enormously attended rallies. So, for example, many of you might have been at the Camden rally. The Judge Street Camden rally, I think that was organised by Stop the War. It wasn't a centrally campaign organised thing, and that was a really wonderful moment, and there were 100 of them around the country over the course of the 3 months. The second thing was the social media. The social media was organised by people who, generally speaking, hadn't met Jeremy Corbyn, hadn't met John McDonnell, hadn't met a lot of the campaign team, were all over the country, most of whom had never met each other or even spoken to each other on the phone, but were organising through social media, and the social media campaign was streets ahead of all of the others. Yes, social media can be a bit of a bubble, but it is a bubble that is growing, and it is a channel which will, think where it was 4 years ago, the election is in 4 years, think where it will be then. Jeremy Corbyn's response to the budget, which was, I think, his finest performance so far at the dispatch box since becoming leader, that was watched in 24 hours 1 million times on Facebook. Now, that is pretty big. That's a lot of people. That's something that can be increased. And then the third thing was the volunteer operation. That was by necessity, because there were so many people that started to come in. It was fairly horizontal. It allowed people to come in and take positions of leadership who hadn't been around for that long, didn't know that much, but could try things out and get started. That meant that we ended up with this very big campaign and lots of capacity, which is even, hopefully now is even larger with momentum. If we had to do a leadership campaign again, it would be that, but that on steroids. So I think it's these three things we need to look at, which is how can we build a campaign that is bigger and broader and done in a different way from a lot of how we've traditionally, how the left has traditionally organised. It takes advantage of a lot of these potentially new people coming in who are unbelievably frustrated with what's going on, but it will act if they if the cost is relatively low and that we need to bring them in at some level, but also if there is an opportunity to do something. A leadership campaign, perfect, there's an opportunity to do things. But I think we need to be, there's something that Jeremy Corbyn said in the last phone bank in Holborn where he came to, is mobbed by sort of hundreds of people, and he said that when he was a councillor in Haringey, they had Haringey Labour Party against as a banner with the blank for what the word was, because they were always against something. They'd go on a protest, Haringey Labour Party against whatever it would be. And he said, the thing that's so amazing about this campaign, and it is true, when you speak to people who are not that politicised, this is really important. It was a campaign for something. It was articulated as a positive thing to change something in a positive direction, and that is what we need to capture. So I think, I'm probably running out of time, aren't I? I've got 3 minutes, right, I will finish in 1.5. So I think that's our tool for building a movement that is bigger than what we have now, and that is linked to a party with this left leadership, and that can maintain that left leadership in that party and transform that party to be far more open to movements, and rather than, as it has been for quite a long time, and in fact generally the record of centre-left parties is to dull down the radicalism, dull down the power of the movement. We need to work out ways that we can use some of the tools of this party, even if it's just part of its name, part of its actions, to open it up to empower this broader network, because there is an enormous amount of capacity of people out there who really want to do a lot of things, but they need to be able to do it in their own terms. So I know I'm nearly done. There's something that Tariq Ali said about Tony Benn in 1981 during the deputy leadership campaign, and it's still true. This is exactly what we should be doing, but we should be doing it in updated to the changed political economy of now, and also the changed social, political and digital technologies that we can use. He said, He, Ali, said of Ben, "He has understood that Labour's only serious electoral chance lies in turning the entire organisation into a gigantic lever of popular political mobilisations, championing the causes of all sectors of the oppressed and offering a governmental perspective of real change." So, for the left to win, I think we need to grow out the movement, make it as open as possible so that it can be a lever for giant political mobilisations, that it can go and rebuild the types of community organising and help rebuild the trade union movement. To, you know, when that was written, there were 14 million members of trade unions. Now they're 6.5, I think. And the governmental perspective of real change, that comes from people helping to shape the Labour Party's policy, which doesn't come from having clever think tanks which come up with clever ideas. It comes from putting large pressure to the left of the leadership so that they are able to put forward the right sort of agenda and win on it, and we can build support for that in the country, and hopefully that's how we can win.
Thanks very much, James. Next we have Lindsey German. Lindsey is a member of the Steering Committee of Counterfire.
Thanks very much, Maisie. And I'd just like to sort of kind of follow on from James's point about what Tariq Ali said about Tony Penn, that the idea of Labour in the early 80s, when you had the Benite movement, was to really was to represent all the different sections of the oppressed and trade union movement and so on. And that's something that Labour has, as we know, massively moved away from in terms of Blair and Brown governments, in terms of all those sorts of things. And I think both the amazing and the very, very refreshing thing about the election of Jeremy Corbyn as leader is, it strikes me, it reflected two things. It reflected, firstly, the movements in Britain themselves. And when I think about it, even in terms of the Labour left and Labour left MPs, I don't think any other could have got the kind of vote that Jeremy got. I think he got it because he has had decades now of very, very close involvement, not just with the anti-war movement, the anti-austerity movement. I mean, you know, I've always bumped into Jeremy all over the place. I went to the High Courts in the Strand to protest about something, I can't remember what now, and Jeremy's coming out with all the Kenyans who've just won their case over the ill treatment of the Mau Mau in the late 1950s. So he had so many different people. There must have been thousands and thousands of people who actually had campaigned with Jeremy, and I think it's the accumulation of the sense of betrayal and bitterness of Blair in particular, and what Blair did to the Labour Party, but also the accumulation of all those movements. That you get 2 million people on the streets in 2003, it's not reflected in terms of Labour holding anybody to account or doing any of those sorts of things. The second thing I think that Jeremy represented, and this is obviously a much wider question and wider perhaps than we're discussing this afternoon, is he reflected the international polarisation between left and right, which is going on, what's sometimes called the sort of escape from the centre parties, and we're seeing it both with the growth of the far right to a large extent in countries like France, but also the growth of left movements and of left parties around the world, from Bernie Sanders to Podemos in Spain to the huge wave of strikes that have gripped France, and the whole huge wave of movements that have gripped France over the last few weeks. So I think his election was a product of those wider questions, and obviously galvanised this huge level of support and the huge level of young people involved, but also older people who'd left Labour over the Iraq War, who'd left over all sorts of things, but who saw the hope of coming back. And I think it was a tremendous achievement, which certainly I, for one, when you do those things on New Year's Eve where you predict what's going to happen in the next year, I would never have dreamt in 1,000 years that will be the outcome of the May 2015 general election, and I guess that many other people were the same. And you know, we now have all this, you know, James has referred to obviously opposition within the Labour Party. I mean, it seems to me the right wing of the Labour Party, particularly of the PLP, just will not accept anything that Jeremy Corbyn does as good. I mean, I think it's quite incredible. Sadiq Khan won the London mayor with a big swing towards Labour. A black person won the mayor in Bristol when he was defeated 4 years ago. Labour did, I think, pretty well in the elections, all things considered, including the daily attacks from the media and from some of their own MPs. And what does Sadiq Khan say after he's elected? We need to learn how to win elections. Well, you've just won an election. You know, I don't kind of get what all this is about, except we know what it's about. It's actually not that Jeremy Corbyn is unelectable, it's that they fear that Jeremy Corbyn is electable. They fear that the Tories are increasingly unpopular and divided. They fear that there is growing opposition to the austerity and all sorts of other policies that are going on in this country, and that already Labour, having a Labour leader like Jeremy Corbyn has made a difference over questions like disability, questions like the budget speech and all those different kind of things. I think already has made, I'm not saying a huge difference, but has stopped the Tories doing certain things that they wanted to do. And when you have a combination of the Labour leadership talking like this and teachers threatening strikes over academies or whatever the different issue is, or the disability protesters and so on, then you've got a very big dynamic which I think frightens the Tories, it frightens the Blairites, and it frightens all those sorts of people. So I think in a way, if they really weren't worried about Jeremy Corbyn, they'd just put him in the corner and not worry about him. But actually, what they're doing all the time is a constant onslaught. And to me, that's a permanent state of affairs while Jeremy is the leader. That isn't going to go away. They're not going to suddenly wake up one day and say, oh, we think he's not so bad after all. I'm not saying one or two people won't do that, but most of the people attacking him now will continue to attack him. It was said when the EU referendum campaign started that Labour, quite rightly, would not have anything to do with the Tories in terms of its campaigning, because it realised what a mistake that was in Scotland. What do we find? Harriet Harman's in Asda with David Cameron, probably the first time he's been in Asda ever in his life, probably only the second time she's been in Asda in her life. You know, you've got Ed Balls with George Osborne, you've got this kind of thing. This is what they're trying to do. They're trying to triangulate all the time to the right and trying to find crises where they can damage Jeremy. Now, let's assume that Jeremy, either there's an election before 2020, which I think is at least a kind of a possibility. I don't think we should rule out, particularly with the crisis that the Tories are presently in, which, regardless of the EU referendum, is not going to go away and is still going to remain with these big, big divisions. We know that if Jeremy Corbyn wins an election or is the biggest single party in 2020 or in 2017, 2018, we know there will be a crisis. We know that we've seen what has happened to people in Greece. We've seen what's happened to any government. We know what will happen to a government with Jeremy Corbyn, which even tries a relatively limited number of reforms. We know the whole establishment, we know the whole state machine, we know the whole international machine, the whole kind of fear, the run on the pound, the Bank of England. You can see it now. We've seen it. You can read Chris Mullin's book, or we've seen it in Chile. We've seen it in all sorts of places before. So the real question for us, it seems to me, is if the left wants to win, is not just a question, can we win an election? In my mind, that is definitely a possibility. I mean, who knows in terms of the actual arithmetic, but it's definitely a possibility. But it depends on a number of things, what then happens afterwards. You see, I think, firstly, I don't agree with the people who say that Jeremy should abandon all sorts of policies in order to get elected. Particularly the international and foreign policies, to tell the truth, because they're many of the reasons why he's as popular as he is, and many of the reasons why he got elected. And by the way, they're not going to go away. We live in a major imperial power, and they're not going to stop banging on about tridents, banging on about wars, banging on about the refugees and all the other things that they bang on about. So that's going to continue. I don't think we can rely on that being something that we don't have to face. I also think we can't rely on internal manoeuvres inside the Labour Party. I mean, James hasn't referred to them really at all, I think, in terms of what he said today. But we know that, and there's obviously all sorts of very sensible and valid things that people inside the Labour Party are doing, trying to get left-wing people elected to the NEC, trying to get deselection where they think it's appropriate, trying to get a situation where MPs are accountable to the members and to their constituents as well. So I think all of those are things which are valid, but I don't think that is what is going to change the nature of the Labour Party. Labour as a party is ready to the state that we're now in, and therefore it will require some fundamental breaches in terms of being able for the left to be able to advance in any serious way. Have I got a minute?
Yeah, you've
okay.
got 2 minutes.
Okay, I've got 2 minutes. So just very, very quickly on what that means. Firstly, I think our strength is in the movement, in the widest possible sense. We know that the mass of the trade union movement, when it does move into action, is fantastically strong. We know all the movements over austerity, like the People's Assembly, and have been some of the major forces for creating protest demonstrations, all those different kind of things. So I think that is the first thing we need to do. I secondly think that we have to have support for Jeremy, which is both within the Labour Party, within Momentum, within all those sorts of other things, but also outside of the Labour Party. As far as I'm concerned, I voted Labour nearly all my life, and that doesn't bother me particularly, even though it's meant governments led by Tony Blair and people like that. But it is also about saying, do we need political organisation outside of Labour? And to me, you do need organised socialists. You do need people who've got strategy and tactics. You do need people who are informed by the history of the movement, both in this country and internationally. And to me, that means supporting Jeremy Corbyn, supporting a Corbyn Labour Party in every way that we can, in order to get it elected, in order to defend it against the right, but also saying, if we want to achieve fundamental transformation, we're going to have to go beyond Labour as well.
Very much, Lindsey. And next and finally we have Andrew Murray. Andrew is Chief of Staff at Unite.
Thank you, Faisy, and thanks to Counterfire for the invite to speak. I mean, how can the left win is a question that presents a new aspect today as compared to what it might have done had we been discussing it a year ago. Then the question would have had a very much a hopeful and hypothetical aspect. It was a bit like saying, how can Leicester City win the Premiership or something improbable like that. But now we are in a different situation where we can talk, as James has just done, about how the left has won, as well as how it's going to win in the future. And of course, there's an issue of win. What do we mean by winning? There's different layers to the left winning. The first layer is the left has to mobilise masses of people in struggle, in campaigning, around the consequences of capitalism in crisis and imperialism and its wars. Without those movements, without breaking through the stranglehold of passivity and inertia on millions of people, then the left isn't really going to win anything. But the good news is that that is an area where the left has been winning battle by battle, inch by inch, over the course of this century. The Stop the War Coalition is still perhaps the greatest example, the millions that were mobilised and the consequences of that movement that have resonated through politics to this time. There's the work of the People's Assembly as well, and of course that is reflected in the campaign that James has described last year to elect Jeremy Corbyn leader of the Labour Party. The mobilisation of people, the bringing them into activity, the giving a focus, the challenging the status quo. We need to learn lessons from all those movements, in particular how we can connect these sort of not exactly spontaneous but surprising uprisings of tens of thousands of people pouring into political activity when they see an issue, a point, a campaign, something that can make a difference, with the established institutions of the labour movement, trade unions and progressive politics. Knit together, those are a very powerful force, a force for protecting what we achieved and for taking change even further. And as those movements accumulate strength and experience and start to alter the political weather, they are, I think, the foundation of our prospects for future advance. Now, the second layer of the left winning means conquering positions in the political space, and that is where what Jeremy Corbyn has achieved, or the campaign around Jeremy Corbyn, I'm sure he'd be the first to say it's not a personal achievement, that has made such a difference. We now have a focus on protecting Jeremy Corbyn's left leadership, left and anti-imperialist leadership of the Labour Party, and in taking it to electoral victory, whether that's in 2020 or sooner. I mean, had we been discussing this a couple of years ago, then maybe there's a debate, should the left oppose Labour electorally? I think we can really park that one for now. That at least cannot be the main focus of the left's activity. It is about uniting around this opening that has been established in the Labour Party, defending it and extending its potential to the maximum. That again involves a mass movement. Without a mass movement mobilised in support of the sort of issues which, as Lindsey has said, Jeremy Corbyn has always championed, social justice and peace. Without mass movements, his chances of success shrink very considerably. We have to reckon with the possibility of a coup against him. I don't think it'll happen this year. The future, who knows, within the Labour Party, trying to reverse the decision which the right wing of the Labour Party loathed, that was taken last year to elect him. And we have to reinforce Jeremy's own strong tendency to stand firm. That is one of the most impressive things about him, because I mean, MPs, really, there are a few outstanding exceptions, but basically they can be relied upon to lose their heads when everyone around them is keeping theirs. And the tendency now for panic and vacillation and retreat is very strong, and it can only be countered by the sort of political pressure which, for example, was mobilised by Momentum and Stop the War Together at the time of the Syria vote last December, which ended in the Labour Party in a victory for Jeremy's position. But we have to keep our nerves and unite around Jeremy. And I remember Jeremy got elected on the Saturday. By the Sunday evening, a left-wing journalist whose blushes I will spare was saying to me on the phone, "It's all going dreadfully wrong, it's all awful." And, you know, get a grip, really. I mean, all this stuff about, you know, whether you sing the national anthem or not, how long it takes to do a reshuffle, this is complete fluff. It's completely immaterial. And the movement has to be the antidote to the bubble in supporting Jeremy and the stands he's taking. And that is in itself moving towards a victory that will count for something if Labour get elected under Jeremy's leadership, and prepare the ground for, as it were, the next layer of winning, which is, I'm not told to be upbeat, I better overshoot here, but it is socialism. Because actually we don't just need a Labour government to nationalise the railways, to end austerity, or even just to stop criminal foreign wars. We need a government that can start the process of taking power out of the hands of the elite, and a situation when working people and our mass movements can be reconstituted as political power. Now maybe that sounds like I'm going a bit too far, but the IMF today is saying that neoliberalism hasn't worked. Tony Blair 2 days ago said he doesn't understand politics anymore. This is, as somebody else said, a ruling class that is finding it hard to carry on in the old way. And when we have a Corbyn-led government, of course the danger of coups, I think Lindsey alluded to this, won't come from right-wing backbench MPs. They'll just be the straw men for other, much more better equipped forces that will want to put a halt to this process. But I believe we can have confidence in our own strength, that we can use the tremendous, I mean, who would have thought we'd be talking about Jeremy Corbyn as leader of a Labour Party just 12 months ago? It seemed impossible to talk now about a Labour government that can start to challenge the centres of wealth and power in this country, that can create the conditions for a mobilised working people to move towards socialism. That, it seems to me, is not impossible. I mean, just 2 weeks ago I had the honour of going to Dublin to unveil a plaque to James Connolly. Now, when the Easter Rising took place 100 years ago, they actually knew they were going to lose, or they were pretty absolutely certain of it. But they saw the opening to shake the British Empire in the midst of a bloody war to its foundations, and now they are remembered and honoured for it. We can see the same possibilities today. And it was at the time, in the international socialist movement, virtually only Lenin who said, actually, anyone that criticises the Easter Uprising is a miserable peasant, or some words to that effect. And we have to make the use of the opportunities that exist in the midst of imperialism in crisis to seize the opportunities for change. So how does the left win? It builds mass movements, strengthens those mass movements in fighting against the effects of capitalism and imperialism. It unites that with a labour movement that can actually conquer political power, and then it builds on that to hold forth the prospect and the possibility of socialism in our time. So to put it chemically rather than dialectically, I can be given, it's one part Stop the War, the People's Assembly, it's one part the Labour movement and Jeremy Corbyn, and it's one part Leninism and the revolutionary tradition.
Thanks very much, Andrew. So we have about 20 minutes for questions, contributions from the floor. Just indicate, and I will take you. There's a hand back there, and then you. Yeah, Cameron.
I'd just like to re-emphasise a point that Lindsey was making about not making concessions in terms of our arguments on the left. That is kind of been put forward by the kind of soft left that's emerged in Owen Jones, Paul Mason, etc., etc., for two reasons. One, because it's just a kind of wrong-headed strategy when so many people's opinion has moved in the last however many years to anti-war stances towards, full nationalisation, etc. To ignore these things would essentially completely null and stop the movement moving forward. It's just kind of idea that you need to look like part of the establishment and only mention anti-austerity stuff, and all the other stuff kind of leave that to other people to talk about. Not just because it's a bad strategy for winning people over, but also because it ignores actually the ideological and class-based opinions that people have. Where Owen Jones, for instance, has been having, he does videos where he has conversations with Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Tory MP, or Jess Phillips, and tries to make out, oh, we're not that different really, we've just got slightly different ideas, and you're a really friendly bloke. And so, well, it confuses politics as just a kind of battle of ideas, and that there's not much in between them. I just think that people can do stuff a bit better than you, when actually there's a huge ideological, historical difference there that you have to confront. And it's just ridiculous to think that, Jacob Rees-Mogg, it's just a difference of opinion and we'll sort of persuade them over. It just doesn't make any sense. So I just want to re-emphasise the point against the kind of soft left argument. I mean, and most obviously in the EU debate where, Corbyn's had to make a concession to become pro-EU, as have other MPs. When at the same time, the same MPs that are pushing that argument are saying we need to appeal to the kind of UKIP vote, and saying we need to be a little bit more anti-immigrant at the same time as saying it doesn't make much sense really. I just kind of want to point that out. Thanks.
I should say, try and keep your contributions to a couple of minutes. I'll do that on the mic when you've got when I want you to wrap up. And also, I'd also encourage women to put their hand up and speak. Mick.
Yeah, in Doncaster, where I'm from, our People's Assembly has been quite successful over the last couple of years. We've mainly involved Labour Party people, and which they've been the easiest people to get involved on the left, I'd say, in activity under the People's Assembly banner. And I thought it was a fantastic breakthrough when Jeremy got elected leader of the Labour Party. And since then, obviously we've seen the momentum come into being, which I think is a great idea. We definitely need somebody an organisation within the Labour Party to defend Corbyn's politics, to take that forward and ensure that he gets to the next election. Because I think people will vote for him in the next election. You know, I think that's undoubted. But the thing with momentum at the minute is, I mean, I've been to momentum meetings and they've been quite boring, I would say. In terms of they've not really kind of took hold of that excitement which got Jeremy elected in the first place. I think that they tend to concentrate, they kind of mirror the Labour Party. I'm not a Labour Party member myself, I'm a counterfire member. Because I never wanted to get involved in all the election campaigning stuff, you know, as a priority. I think that it's more important that people take to the streets and you know, political activity is amongst wider people. But I find that the momentum meetings mirror Labour Party meetings, and I think that is a real problem. That I think we've got a new organisation that isn't really living up to what it's supposed to be doing. You know, and I mean, I talk about politics in momentum meetings, and luckily I've been able to get a lot of the people involved, momentum people involved in the People's Assembly. But I think that's the way, you know. I think that we have to still have to build a movement on the streets, and I still think that People's Assembly, Stop the War, is the way forward.
Thanks, Mick. So I'll take this woman over here, and then Alistair.
Thanks. I'm really grateful to have come here because there's a lot of hope, and all the speakers have conveyed it very well. I do think there's something of a bridge missing between some of the activist left community and the more mainstream political left community, if you like, because I go to a lot of these kinds of meetings, and there are still a lot of people, even after Jeremy Corbyn got elected, there are still a lot of people in the left activist community who will recommend for other people not to vote. And I think that's a very, very big mistake, because that way we got the Conservatives in last time. So I think there needs to be a bit more bridge building as well between those two communities.
Thanks. Alistair. Alistair, did you want to speak? All right. Sorry.
Okay, if we're going to talk about how can the left win, I think it's important that we look at the examples where the left is winning. Now, the news wants to tell us that the whole of Europe is being swept by a wave of far-right parties, fascism, and anti-immigrant people, completely ignoring the fact in some parts of Europe this isn't happening. And actual fact is new left parties which are emerging. And in particular, I want to say something about Spain, because they go to the polls again in 4 weeks' time for their second general elections since December, where they had a very indecisive election, but one which saw the massive breakthrough for Podemos. Now, in that election, for reasons which I shan't go into, them and the alliance led by the Communist Party, Spanish Communist Party, were unable to get together in an alliance, and it essentially meant the million votes of the United Left were wasted. Now, they've managed to sort themselves out, and there's going to be an alliance, which, just statistically, based on last time's voting, means they will overtake the Socialist Party, the equivalent Labour Party, on June 26. But actually, when the General Secretary, Pablo Chica, of Podemos was interviewed on the news recently, he said, you know, now we've got his alliance, you're going to overtake the Socialist Party. He says, we want to overtake the Popular Party, which is a Conservative party. This is the kind of thing they're talking about coming first in the election and completely transforming Spanish politics. Now, there's a reason for this, and it isn't just because they've got very good PR, but they've got fantastic PR. You know, they're completely different from anything that's happened before. It's very radical and different new look. But it came out of the movements. It came out of the movements, first of all, of the squares, when they occupied Puerta del Sol and squares across Spain. But even when the occupation of Puerta del Sol finished, they didn't just go home to vote for the Socialist Party or something such like. They built new social movements. They built new movements around housing, a massive movement right across Spain that's prevented like thousands of evictions. They built the so-called Waves movement, the White Wave organising health workers, the Green Wave. I can't remember. They've all got different colours. Like green is teachers, and they were wave after wave of social action they built that like involved circles of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. At points, mobilising millions of people. This is what's created the way that Podemos has risen on. Because it's not just that people believe that want radical change. People want lots of radical change in this country, but people believe that radical change is actually really possible. If we want like to really lift like Labour to the point where it hasn't been for many years, to break out of its core vote, to mobilise millions of people, and particularly to become hegemonic, especially amongst young people, which is what Podemos has succeeded massively in doing. It has to unite, and we have to raise the party up on a wave of social action. We have to build a movement. There's no two ways about it. It can be done. It has happened in Spain. We need to repeat it here.
Thanks. We'll have Millie and then Kevin.
I want to ask the panel what they think the role is rebuilding the trade union movement, because in Greece, for instance, we saw a mass movement. We saw a mass movement of people out on the streets, but they put their hopes into an electoral party, Syriza, and that didn't end well. That ended really badly. We also now look across the water to France, and a left-wing trade union, the CGT, has said to the government, actually, you know what? We're not taking we're not allowing you to make it easier to sack us, to extend our working day, to do all of these things. They've got a strong trade union there. Now that battle isn't won yet, but they're looking pretty strong. So what does the panel think about the role of rebuilding the trade union movement in this country in terms of linking up with all of those other movements and organising, groups of workers who are the working class who aren't in unions at the moment? What is the role of that in this vision of how the left can win?
Thanks.
Andrew ended on a Leninist note, and of course Lenin famously said that we're not just oppositional, we need strategy and tactics, and this will indeed mean compromises, shifts and turns and so on. And I say that because there can be a kind of caricature about this argument about how the left can win the middle ground and how we can advance. We do need to win the middle ground. We know that we don't have majority opinion over a number of questions: Islamophobia, the refugees, and so on. The caricature is that it's either a kind of just action faction movementism. You go off and do kind of blind activity, and then on the other hand there's politics, which is done in a kind of quite conventional way. Now the movements that Andrew, James and Lindsey described have been incredibly political over the last 15 years. People had to make decisions about how to push on the Libya question when it wasn't as clear to many people as it is now that Libya would be a disaster. How to respond to the anti-Semitism smears without falling into traps and clarifying ideas. It's been very, very political, and it's meant compromises in the sense of tactical compromises to build alliances, to broaden the movement while maintaining its militancy and so on. And that's important because the argument from people, it's kind of really coming from Yanis Varoufakis across Europe, and it's echoed by a good friend of mine, Paul Mason and others. Now, the argument for compromise there is different because it's not an argument about how do we maximise the base of the movement and win the ideas of the left inside of the mass of the society. It's how do you triangulate with the right wing of the Labour Party. And the problem is the right wing of the Labour Party is to the right of the centre opinion in most questions. So that's not actually a strategy for how do you make perhaps necessary compromises to, for example, around the Alf Dubs Amendment, where people might not say all refugees in, but they will say the 3,000 kids. I'm prepared to make that compromise to build the movement. That's not the same as how can I possibly compromise with John Mann so that we can find a middle point over Palestine or any other question. And it's important to separate out, to get that right, because the weight of the movement is not just that it stirs people up, but the weight of the left argument inside the Labour Party and in the society rests upon an intelligent movement with an organised core putting forward those ideas. How it organises and where it organises is a big question. But the necessity for a self-organised and intelligent socialist core in the movement is irrefutable.
Thanks, Kevin. We have Nick at the back.
Thanks. Yeah, quite a few people have talked about the Labour right, and I think we should be absolutely clear, about how determined they are to bring Corbyn down. And from Tony Blair's comments this morning, that electing Jeremy Corbyn would be a dangerous experiment. I think, it's even kind of that they would prefer the Tories to win than Labour to win under Jeremy Corbyn. And I mean, the absolute gall of the man, we know that Chilcot in about a month's time is going to cast him in a very, very bad light. It's absolutely outrageous that he should come forward and say that. And of course, before the local elections, we had the anti-Semitism row, which was, at worst engineered by the right of the Labour Party, and at best heavily amplified. So, I think we really need to do two things. We had in Norwich, I went to a Trades Council meeting this week, and there's a really good speaker from Momentum, and our Trades Council affiliated to Momentum, and I thought that was really, really positive. But quite a few people that spoke at the meeting were saying that straight after Jeremy had been elected, there were loads of people going to Momentum meetings, going to Labour Party meetings, but actually, because the structure of the meetings weren't kind of changed, that they were still very long, they were very bureaucratic, they were quite boring, as other people have said, those numbers have dwindled. So I think we've got to make politics as open and as interesting and as dynamic as we can to keep particularly the young people, but also the older people that have come back, really, really heavily engaged. And I think the second thing we need to do is to absolutely amplify every possible struggle that we can. I'm a teacher in the NUT, and we're balloting for strike action at the moment, and we're going to have a day strike at the start of July, and then we're going to plan to escalate that with a good ballot at the start of the next academic year. But one thing that we said at NUT conference is we wanted to join forces with the junior doctors, and we wanted to take action together. And I think that's really, really important. So I think, our task has got to be to create absolute wave upon wave of crisis for this government, not just individual days here and there separated by months that they can recover from. We've got to create an absolute crisis that supports Jeremy and helps us bring the Tories down before 2020.
Yes, yeah, you in the front. In the front here. Right up the front.
Just a quick comment from what the last person said. He said that when they went to Momentum meetings, they were bureaucratic and boring. The structures of all meetings, including this one, hasn't changed. It's the same format that all the left uses and Labour Party uses. And the difference between that and Podemos and other the movements that are happening in France is that they're on the streets, they're using direct action, they're using different models. We need to learn. If we're going to step out of this, we need to start looking at what they're doing and step out of our comfort zone. And that's the boring thing. It's not about Labour Party, it's about the left in England and how we failed because we've got a model that hasn't changed in the 70s, mostly dominated by white males and the structure, which is not conducive for genuine discussions, genuine changes and ideas of people who are confident speaking and those who aren't. So we need to start thinking about how we really reach out and change our way, our comfort zones, and start doing different things differently.
We've got one over there. Jack. That's at the bar. Yep. Just indicate if you want to speak.
Hi, yeah. I guess just kind of responding to that last point. Unfortunately, I am a white male, but I can come from a Bristol group, Bristol Counterfire and Bristol People's Assembly groups that actually have a lot of involvement, have women leading them, a lot of involvement from women, a lot of involvement from, quite a number of people from different backgrounds from across Bristol. And actually, they are dynamic. And guess what? We had an organising meeting a couple of weeks ago that had 35 people at it. That's just to plan, a few events happening next week. And we've had, multiple rallies over the last couple of years with 200, 300, 500 people just after the election and thousands of people on the streets. That's the kind of movement that the People's Assembly's created. It's been a dynamic movement. That was the movement that brought Jeremy Corbyn to power. So I really think sometimes when people make some of these criticisms about the left, they need to get in on the action that's actually happening now, because young people are at the heart of it. And if you came to the meetings, it's young people that are organising them, and that's the way we're talking. And when I go to, you know, a local Momentum meeting, there has been a few young people there, and they have complained. They complained about the length of the meetings. They complained at the fact that they're being moaned at by older members for not being more involved. When, you know, when your first campaign is to get out at, you know, signing people up for voting, it's not necessarily what a lot of them came on board for. And whilst, you know, I don't like to criticise Momentum, I agree with working with them, you know, cooperatively and getting them as involved as much as possible in the movements. I think that is the focus. The movements are the focus. And I think the People's Assembly's actually done a really good job building those things, and we need to keep pressing on. The convoy to Calais is a perfect example of something that actually isn't, you know, what people are criticising all the time. It's a direct action, a huge direct action in the centre of London, and it's also building, you know, a wave of solidarity across the country. You know, so there's plenty of creative ideas coming. Just get involved in the movement.
And all the way back over here at the front, Ellen.
My politics have always been informed by what's happening personally to me, my family, etc. I'm fortunate that Jeremy Corbyn is my MP, and I saw him in October 2014 with a matter as a constituent, and I said to him as I was leaving, I said, I can only bring myself to vote for the Labour Party because you're my MP, otherwise I could not. I would find it very difficult. And for me, you cannot wait, you cannot sit around waiting for people. You have to go out and make things happen. I mean, I as an Asian woman, I couldn't wait around for Asian men of my community to do bugger all. I mean, I became involved in South All Black Sisters in the 80s. I was the first person there ever employed. We, the Asian women, changed. The group changed the law on provocation for women, for black, white, all women in this country. You cannot wait around. I mean, I'm now involved in an organisation called Boycott Workfare. We're changing the narrative around welfare. We couldn't wait for the Labour Party to do that. It was the Labour Party that brought in the conditionality of welfare, which this government has run right to its ultimate and has run people down and disenfranchised people, made them homeless. So you can't wait. So I'm excited by the idea that I will do what I can to get somebody from the left to represent the community that I live in, and but at the same time I will also challenge the Labour Party for the things that they do wrong. In Islington, they put employment coaches into doctors' surgeries to get people with disabilities and mental health back to work even when they're not ready, which, you know, is resulting in people committing suicide. So I think the Labour Party has to be open and look at what's happening to to people who might potentially vote for them in the future.
Thanks. We have time for one, possibly two more questions, if they're short. I can see one over here. Okay, great.
Hiya, I just want to say thank you very much to everybody that organised this. I've had a really, really great day, and I think that a lot of the things that we talked about, especially, I mean, kind of throughout the day, but especially in this panel, and people in the audience doing questions and stuff, has been sort of, you know, obviously following this question of how can we win. A lot of it has been sort of, oh, people are complaining and everyone needs to get involved in the movements and stuff like that. And I think that something that I found really, really useful, I have suffered with my mental health, with depression, with anxiety and things, and I think that when you're politically opposed to people in power, that's a pretty depressing and frustrating situation. And I think that something that has really helped me is being in places like this, being around people who are positive, who are doing things, who are talking about things, and just, I guess what I wanted to say was just thanks to everyone who organised this, and that it's things like this that that help us to realise that, yeah, we've got a lot of anger and yeah, we've got a lot of frustration, and those can feel like negative things, but actually they give us the drive to do the things that we need to do. And there are so many movements that are already happening. You've got obviously Counterfire, but then you've got, I mean, I'm from Bristol as well, and I want to kind of second what Jack said of like, we do have a dynamic movement. We do have lots of alternative media. We do have these things that are already happening. So it's just a case of people, you know, getting involved.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot of positivity to be had, actually.
Thanks very much. So before I bring in the speakers again, just a couple of announcements.
Paul Mason and Owen Jones are soft left. This is brilliant. A year ago, Sadiq Khan was soft left. I completely agree with what Kevin was saying about winning people over and your strategy and tactics and political choices to do that, and triangulation. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's absolutely crucial to be strategic in order to win people over in a sustainable and long-term way to your positions, and that's not the same thing as capitulating. But there is also capitulation in that, and that absolutely cannot happen. I think it's in the Podemos example is interesting, and it kind of fits into the sort of emerging theme about whether we're doing it right and how we should be doing it a bit differently. They kind of explicitly try to, although they're obviously left and they're obviously a left movement and an anti-systemic left movement, they try to not be so obviously, you know, they talk about being transversal as their strategy. They try to articulate themselves in populist terms. They try to appeal to people that wouldn't otherwise be, you know, anywhere near the organised left, who aren't aware of or don't react positively to its language and its symbols. And they are articulating quite effectively a left politics doing that. So I think that's something we need to be aware of. Also, building our own institutions is really important. Part of the reason why Podemos are so effective is their communication skills are brilliant, which were honed on their own TV show, which also, you know, there are problematic elements, obviously, of like having just someone's face as being what you have on the ballot. Pablo Iglesias' face was on the ballot paper, which can be problematic. But we need to continue building those things so that we've got the capacity to convince, to win people over, and to take on roles. But on this boring meetings thing, completely agree that, like, Jeremy Corbyn winning the leadership of the Labour Party does not mean that suddenly everything has changed and we're doing things in a new and exciting way. Some people, of course, are doing things in a new and exciting way, and some momentum groups are doing things in a new and exciting way. Some of them really aren't. Some of them are doing your kind of ABC of chairmanship, citrine thing, which is how the left loses. That's no disrespect to what was an incredibly important contribution to the political technology of the Labour movement of the first half and, you know, first 3/4, let's say, of the 20th century. Extremely important. It doesn't work today. People don't go to the meetings. They don't want to do it. I think the watchword for the left within the Labour Party used to be accountability, and now I think it should be about participation in action. How do you get, in my ward party, we've got 350 members, I think, and it's a good local party. 18 people will go to, like, your biggest meeting, because people don't want to go to a meeting where you get a bit of a feedback from a councillor, you have a bit of an accountability session, you sort of talk a bit, and then someone talks about some motions, and then you go away again. You don't know where the motions go, and you have no power. So we should be, and Momentum is also very much guilty of it, because we're all, you know, it's not like we're totally different people because of September the 12th. We're all the same people. We're all trying to organise the same things. We've all got our same failures and our learned bad practices, and so we just need to, as much as possible, try to open up and try to focus on participation and focus on action. People get involved in politics at a much broader level than, much bigger base than what we have now, because they want to do something, because they want to be involved in some kind of campaign, and they can see a goal, and that's the kind of thing we need to provide.
Lindsey?
Yeah, firstly, somebody asked the question about what is the role of rebuilding the trade union movement in terms of how the left can win. Now, I think it is very, very important. We know that the economic power that working people have, on a very, very wide scale, people mostly, as James has said, most of them actually aren't in trade unions, most people who work, but around probably, I don't know, about a quarter of them are much more heavily weighted in the public sector. We know that when people do withdraw their labour, when they campaign politically through a trade union, it's incredibly important, and therefore I always think, just as I always think people should vote, and I agree very much with the point that was put, I think people should join a trade union. I think everybody should be members of trade unions, and we should do what we can to strengthen them. And I think that in recent, the figures kind of don't move very much in terms of increase in people joining trade unions. I guess that will have to wait for an explosion of strike action, which is how usually unions have grown in this country, or wars is the other, world wars is the other way that they've grown, but let's hope we don't have one of those. But it is true that if you look at what's going on with the junior doctors, if you look at the talking about strike action over academies, if you look at the UCU who are on strike at this time of year, sort of slightly oddly and counterintuitively, since most of the students aren't there. But, there is a mood of people wanting to challenge the austerity agenda. I think it's very important. Now, this brings me to the question of boring meetings, because we've all been to our fair share of boring meetings on the left over the years, and the older we are, the more we've been to, probably. So I don't think this is something we can put at the door of momentum, certainly, which I guess has exactly the same, as James has said. You have good meetings, you have bad meetings, and even the same group, presumably, can have good and bad meetings. That's how life is, really, if you look at it. I do think with some trade unions there's a very narrow approach to how you get people involved, and I think to a certain extent that can be true for Labour as well. And because the left in Labour, and one of the things I was trying to say, because the left in Labour has a huge battle here, I think they need to be very, very wary of just putting too much into going along to the citrine type meetings and having to fight with a bunch of people who you're not going to change their opinion. I think the left in Labour and outside has to think, if you do things outside of that room, can you have an impact on that room far beyond just going on and trying to get a resolution, whether you get it passed or not. So I think that's very, very important for us. I actually think it's very exciting in Britain at the moment. I know we're always regarded as one of the dullest places on the left internationally, but I don't feel like that. I think having Jeremy Corbyn as leader has transformed a lot of that stuff. I think we do have a whole number of things going on. I think we have a very good record on things like Palestine and anti-imperialism and anti-war, which a number of other countries don't have without getting kind of, proprietorial about it. But I think, we do have and we need to accentuate our strengths. That's the truth of it. We need to say, how can we build those strengths? And I think we need to be much more, we need to say, it's not a question that you don't have to compromise at certain times. Of course, everybody in any movement, you have to think, do you do this or do you do that? There's certain times when you can put something forward, you can't. But you can't compromise on your principles. And also another thing I don't think we can let people do, one of the things that the Blairites are doing is that they are weaponising identity politics against the left. The idea that anti-Semitism is a bigger problem in Labour than it is in the other parties, don't make me laugh. It really isn't the case. I'm not saying there's no problem with it, but the truth is, it is not a huge problem in Labour. The idea that Jeremy Corbyn is a sexist, which is being put by loads of and that he didn't have half women in his shadow cabinet, oh yes he did, it's those kind of things. I think we have to be very upfront about arguing over those questions. We should not allow people to use issues that people care about, like racism and sexism, in order to try to defeat the left. We're the people who fought over those. We're the people who've always gone out on the streets over those issues, and will continue to do so. Just finally, I think that Andrew said that, do we have the potential of building socialism? I think actually having a left leader like Jeremy, it means that socialism is on the agenda, not as an immediate thing, but something that people are once again thinking, can we talk about this? Is it possible? No, it's not possible, lots of people will say, and then it gives at least the opportunity for people to debate and discuss and to organise, and that's the crucial thing for taking the left forward.
thanks, Faisy. Just a few brief points. I mean, about Podemos, I certainly welcome the fact that they've now formed an alliance with the United Left, and obviously I hope they get the best result possible in Spain, and then it will be both interesting and important to see how that evolves if they do become government or a part of a government. But I want to just enter a note of scepticism, not because I wouldn't be supporting Podemos and the United Left if I was in Spain, but because winning an election is clearly not the end of the matter anywhere. I think that's a truth we can probably almost all accept. And I am sceptical about Podemos's, not that they say we have to move on necessarily from the symbolic aspects of the past, but when they say, as Iglesias has done, that strikes and demonstrations are irrelevant or even some undesirable, I worry that that is actually a strategy for more than winning an election, but it's actually a strategy for social change. I remain unconvinced that we're going to have profound social change without an organic connection with the struggles of the working class and the organisations. Maybe Podemos is thinking and will evolve on this, but I think we have to keep a focus on mass struggle as a lever for change. Of course, rebuilding trade unions is a vital issue then in that context. Private sector trade union density is chronically low in this country. Part of that is the union's own responsibilities. We haven't always risen to the challenges. For example, in London today, we now have a multi-ethnic, multinational working class, mainly in service industries, very thinly organised, and reaching that is something we haven't done enough on, and we need to address in a new way. But also the political pressure has been intense. So let's not imagine that if we have a Labour government led by Jeremy Corbyn, I can see hundreds of thousands of people pouring into trade unions in the different political environment, not least an immigrant-friendly political environment that would create. So the rebuilding unions and the political change do exist in a relationship. The sort of final point I wanted to address is this. I suppose on one side momentum is boring, and the other side we need to do things new and exciting. I don't want to sound completely like a boring middle-aged white man, but we can't just fetishise the new and exciting only. For example, we had 4 or 5 years ago the Occupy movement, really helped push issues of inequality up the agenda, but then didn't really leave a trace, certainly not in any organised sense, because it almost made a point of not being organised, of not connecting with, for example, the trade union movement. Now, I think Momentum has a critical role to play. I can't say whether its meetings are boring or not, but one of its roles is trying to embed change in the Labour Party. And that may be something that is, as it were, more citrine than it is Occupy. But that is a profoundly important thing. There are other roles Momentum has played very well in terms, I mentioned the Syria mobilisation. And it's going to find its way forward. But the left has to focus on winning the argument, winning the battles. We are fighting the right wing, both inside the Labour Party and in society more generally. Doesn't mean fighting on every front at every time, coming into a room saying let's fight the lot of you. You have to pick your battles to some extent. But I think we have to accept that will work in different ways and require different forms of organising. And I think this whole dash to win the middle ground. I mean, you need to win a mass movement for social change. If you put it as winning the middle ground, that almost inevitably assumes a dilution of our objectives, and in that sense your movement just starts to fragment. Well, to put it another way, I would rather be in a meeting of 10 people who with a sense of purpose can mobilise 100,000 people than a meeting of 100 people that split 3 ways and mobilise 50 at the end of it.
I wanted to thank everyone for coming. I hope you've been inspired. I hope you've got some ideas. Please stay for the Dangerous Times sessions, and we'll see you in the streets.